The call is to be faithful and trust God to be fruitful.
Bro, I can't with your neck.
But you know what? They were willing to meet me where I was at. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Patros podcast as we dive into healthy masculinity. My name is Allan, and of course, you guys know Jeff. And we have a guest today, a special guest.
Bro, I can't with your neck. Like, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna just have to sit like this. Like,
I'm sorry. I can't.
So
There you go. That doesn't look bad, I don't think.
Man, Allan, so if
I
you're
just
not
keep
watching this
messing
and
my
you're
neck.
just
I have a
listening to
problem
this,
with my neck.
Allan is like, he has to shift his whole body to be able to speak to you. So normally the human anatomy allows the neck to turn like
It
this.
turns this way, but I sit on this side.
And he just turned his, like, he did a full shoulder rotation in a golf swing to get to me.
How about
Y'all are crazy, man.
Oh, man.
do I start over?
No, bro. Let's go.
Okay.
Who do we got today?
got-
I'm going to let you introduce because this is your guy.
Yeah, we have Twinathan, the man, the myth, the legend, a disciple of Jesus. Not like directly in a spiritual matter, but you know what I'm saying.
No.
From South St. Pete, played in Michigan, so went from the
Sunny St. Pete to snowy Michigan, back to sunny Florida.
This man has lived life. He's followed the Lord, and then now he is in ministry, just discipling the next generation. I'd say very well. Very, very well. What's up, bro?
What's up, dog? Thank you guys for having me.
Man, thanks for coming on. We love having you. I think before we get into it, we got to first know that your name is Davontae, but you go by Twin. So you got to help the people understand.
All right, so I actually do have a twin brother. His name is Deontay. My name's Davontae.
That's not confusing.
Yeah, don't know why my parents
Wait till you
did
see
that.
them.
Yeah, we're identical, so we look just alike.
Yeah.
Same haircut, same beard,
Yeah.
and close to the same name. And so
The
if you
same
say-
gorgeous smile, everything.
You say twin, you got a 50% chance of getting it right whoever
Yeah,
you're trying
yeah.
to reach. So, yeah, twin stuck, and twin is what it is. So, what's up?
I love it. I love it. Well, we're glad you're on the podcast today. And, you've been doing, work with the next generation for quite a while. And so we're right in the middle of a series that we call Theology for Regular Dudes. And this one is focused on the next generation. We haven't titled it yet. We'll figure that out. It'll be creative, I'm sure. But especially as we are thinking about how do we reach these folks for Jesus, and how does theology play a role in our worldview? Because I think one of the issues is, for most Christians in America at least, you kind of get sucked into this. This is kind of the we've talked about this in the past. This is the Christianity of the land, and so I just kind of do these things, and you can get into the motions, right? It can become rote. It can become I do these things. This is how it looks, or whatever. And discipleship has become very, very difficult. And maybe we can even start there on discipleship, because I think discipleship. It's kind of a churchy word, in the world they may say mentoring, right, or something. So sometimes even we use the term coaching.
Yeah.
But discipleship is the core idea behind training the next generation. So it doesn't matter what field you're in. If you want to see that next generation grow, you are going to teach them.
Right.
So if you are, a welder, you have somebody behind you that you're teaching. If you are, a painter or an aerosmith, engineer, is that something? Aerosmith? I just said that's a band.
Aerospace.
Aerospace is what it's going for. but Aerosmith
I was gonna
sounds
let you
really
ride
cool.
with it. I was like, let me not. He's on a roll.
I'd rather just like point out my flaws for everyone to know. But you guys get the point. So I think if we can camp just a little bit on defining what discipleship is and what it isn't, because I think there's a broad discipleship,
Yeah.
and then there's a narrow discipleship.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to say, what does God think about it? If theology is a study of God, what does God think, and how should that impact my daily understanding of this? You gotta define terms here. So, Twin, we'll put you on the spot since you're our featured guest here, and you're right in the thick of it with the younger crowd. What is discipleship?
Yeah, so I've always said I just finished my first year of seminary, and I have had the privilege of just being around some good, godly men that obviously love Jesus and love his word and take it serious. And I often say that if I could go to school after seminary and write a doctoral dissertation, it would be on the topic of discipleship.
Wow.
Because I feel like in today's world, we just continue to drop the ball on just raising up people in general. So not even just Gen Z or Gen Alpha or just the younger generation. It's just people in general, right? That we just aren't discipling. We aren't helping people actually follow Jesus and grow in that. It's a lot of it, which I think part of what discipleship is not, is it's not just information transfer. Teaching is part of discipleship, obviously, and I think we understand that, but it's not just that. And I think one of the things that it's easy to do is continue to just give information in specific context or in different in different ways, but we continue to lack the actual pouring into from just an emotional level, connecting with people outside of the church walls, raising them up, teaching them how to love their wives or husbands, showing them how to raise their kids, actually doing life with people that isn't just like open up the Bible or open up this book. It's so much more than just that. And so when I think of discipleship, and I think obviously the scriptures help me define it, but I think also having godly men that have discipled me well, and I am who I am today because of those men, by the grace of God. And so the guys that have loved me and cared for me well have, on one side, they've taught me, right? So they've opened up the scriptures with me. They've opened up different books with me. They've given me different resources so that I don't have to call them every time I have a question about the Bible specifically. I can actually open up the scriptures and understand them for myself, and now I want to do that for other people. So I do have the teaching aspect, but on the other side of that, they've actually been able to help me to love my wife well. I want to serve my community. I want to be a better Christian, and then I want to do that for other men. And so just having those guys around me has been a blessing for me, but they've actually helped me to understand what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus and follow him and love him.
It's good.
That was really good.
Man, got the right guest on. Can you talked about, you use a term in there, do life. And I think that term has, it's kind of a popular term that we kind of use to explain discipleship in kind of this, modern vernacular. And so I like the term. And I also think that there's a lot of churches that talk about doing life who don't actually do life.
Yeah.
So could you, and to either one of you, have you seen examples of this in the church where there is the doing life that maybe is the biblical way, and then have you seen areas or ways where doing life was talked about but was not represented or was not practiced, I guess, in the way that it should have been? Because I hear do life, and I have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious to know what is that like? Break that down for us.
Yeah. So when I think of doing life, I'm thinking of one of the kids that I'm presently pouring into, and the way I do life with him is, we serve together, right? So it's not just, we do meet up and we go through books together. We study the scriptures together.
So part of it is, and would you say that's foundational? Like the studying of the scriptures, is that a foundational piece to discipleship?
I would say so. Yeah. I would say so, because if I can just have fun with this person, right? If I can just invite them to games and we hang out outside of group, but I'm never actually pointing you back to Christ, which when I think of Colossians 1, right? Verse 28, Paul says, him we proclaim, warning everyone, teaching everyone that we may present everyone mature in Christ. And so if my goal is to see this person actually mature in Christ, then the way I get there is by pointing them to Christ. And I think we do that best through the scriptures. So I think, yes, the foundation has to be from the scriptures, from what the Bible says, and teach it. Because that's how people know God, right?
Yeah.
Through the scripture. That's how he's revealed himself. And so I think the first step is helping people understand that they are like part of the priesthood. They can understand the scriptures. They can open them up and know God and grow in a relationship with him by just opening up the scriptures and knowing them better.
So that's one piece of it, would be studying the scriptures. What else is in the do life part?
Yeah, I would say there's so many different trails you can go off on. But one of the things that, I'm just big into, and I think even before being a Christian, like, I did these things, but becoming a Christian, I did them for the right reasons. And so one of the things for me was serving. I want to help people. And as Christians, we all should want to do this. Do we do this perfectly? No. But should we desire to help people? Yes. And part of that is serving. And what I do is I bring people alongside me and say, hey, come serve with me. So I'm not just going to tell you, oh, this is good to do. These are good things to say. I want to exemplify for you how I put this into practice.
That's good.
Because the theology that I'm teaching in the scriptures has to be backed up with some orthopraxy, right? I have to be able to practice the things that I'm saying, which I don't do perfectly, but by God's grace, I'm growing in that area to be able to say, all right, this is what the Bible says, this is what we should be doing. I'm going to do this, but I want you to see how I do this as well. And I can say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And that's what we see through Paul is he's writing letters to churches, he's writing letters to people, and he's saying, do these things. I've taught you these things. Keep doing them, and so forth. And so it's teaching people to do things, serving alongside one another, but just activities. I want to. You got a baseball game? I want to come to that game.
Okay,
stuff like that.
So part of it then is part of it's serving. Then part of it is like doing life like legitimately means. Oh, you got a game. Oh, you're playing pickup basketball. Oh, you're like that. That is incorporated in it.
That can be it, but also people that have helped us, like they've invited us over, and they're in the middle of doing laundry, man. House looks crazy, and they're like, hey, step into our mess. And so it's also just being invited into somebody's mess, inviting people into my mess, and letting them see that I also don't have it all together. And the grace that I desire you to experience is the same grace that I need myself. And so I think that also is part of doing life, is inviting people into your mess and being a part of other people's.
I want to ask Allan. Allan, did you, when you were being discipled, just thinking about the folks that discipled you, did they, I'm assuming the word is kind of like a given. Did they, did you serve with them? Like, did they ask you to serve? Did you go see them? Was that part of your process?
I think it was because I've had different seasons of discipleship, right? And so my first seasons of discipleship, I wasn't necessarily invited to the mess, but I did serve alongside those people. And that was when I was in Miami. And then after that first season, my first few teenage years of being saved, the next season is where that person wasn't at my church, but they were discipling me outside of my church. And that's where they were inviting me into their home, and there was hospitality involved. But I was able to, run errands, do all that stuff, and then just see how they live life alongside their neighbors, alongside them, just within their family. But the serving aspect was moved out because they weren't at my church anymore. And then with Luke, because we've obviously talked about that on this podcast, same thing. Like, throughout him discipling me, some of that he wasn't even at our church, but I was still able to just see how he did life outside. But I wasn't serving alongside. Yeah.
I mean, I think the discipleship, I'm just thinking back to those who discipled me, but then I'm also going to some folks that new to the faith. I'm thinking about folks who were older than me, and so I want to be delicate on this because this is not just to be critical, but it is to examine how we have been doing things. There are very few that I can think of in my mind right now that I saw serve outside of a committee at church.
That's a problem.
So the committee at church, I'm serving, I've got, this committee and that committee, and I'm thinking, okay, that's important. Like, I don't want to denigrate that at all. And is that what Jesus meant when he said, what you've done unto me, like the least of these you've done unto me? And then he goes on to say it's like, the poor and the, the widow and the orphan and, the foreigner and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I don't know that I had a lot of that modeled for me ever. And so not saying you had to go on a missions trip to, be serving, but I didn't do a missions trip until I was well into my 30s. I don't ever remember, I was raised in the church. I don't remember like serving in a soup kitchen or anything like that. And even that stuff, I think, is a lot of placating. It's like, oh, well, we need to be doing these things, so let's make a soup kitchen and you can come to the church and get your soup. But like when I look at Jesus, so just again, thinking about Jesus and what did he do? He said, I just read John, so I got the kids, we're going to read through John this summer. And so they both read John 1 this morning. That's awesome. So at breakfast we were able to chat about it.
That's a lot to break down.
It's a good discipleship right there.
They were like, yeah, Dad, we didn't get much.
Yeah, but then that to people have been like, man, maybe I shouldn't have given John to start off.
But what's so crazy is that once you get into it and you unpack it, they got a lot. Like they actually captured more than they knew.
Yeah.
But they needed somebody to expound on it.
Yeah.
They needed somebody to break on it because once you start asking questions, like, oh yeah, I saw that, and yeah, I do see that in the passage, right? So they were able to get like a lot more out of it. But there's that in John 1, you guys know, where they're like, come and see. There's that piece of it where you got the disciples who are like, come and see. And at one point where John the Baptist is like, hey, there's the Lamb of God. He takes away the sin of the world. And I think it was Peter and Andrew, and they're like, let's go follow him. So they go following him, and it's like I get this picture. They like leave John the Baptist, their current rabbi, run up to this new rabbi, and they're just like following behind him. Literally as he's walking, and at some point Jesus turns around and is like, "What do you want?" And it was just like this funny picture to me. And he's like, and essentially he's like, all right, well, follow me. If you want to be a part of me, if you want to like see what I'm about, if you want to be discipled, follow me. So to your point, there does have to be a willingness. But I also think, they had put themselves in a situation where they were apt to succeed. So I think there's something to be said about discipleship that is on a level of making opportunities or just making it available and then kind of seeing what sticks. So like when you think about how do you recruit those to be discipled, two-part question. One, how do you do that? Like what are those environments that you're creating? And then two, how do you determine who you're going to take and if you have too much on your plate, like how do you determine the workload?
To the first part, I think, at least for me, like speaking just from experience, I've been at Building 28 for 5 to 6 months now, and over the student ministry, and a lot of prayer, of asking the Lord, because I have a desire to disciple people and make disciples, but I also know that not everyone wants that. Not everyone is Christian that comes to my youth group. And so trying to be discerning, trying to follow where the Lord's leading me it can be like difficult. And so I make myself available to everyone, but I also know that the Lord has a way of making things so obvious. And so this specific kid that I'm thinking of, he just texted me randomly and said, hey, when is student group? And he's been coming ever since then. Then he said, hey, I want to grow. What can I do? And it was almost like the Lord threw me like a softball.
It was like a silver platter, right?
And so even today, like some of the women, we were just talking because he signed up to volunteer for the church and to serve inside the church. And it's just cool to see because not everyone is like that, especially not teens that like they're so focused on. I'm sure we'll get into it. But they're just focused on other things. They aren't focused on a relationship with Christ. And so seeking out those people who desire that, is obviously one way to do it, but also cultivating a space where people understand that this is what someone offers and this is what I need. So I want plenty of different things, but what do I need, right? And so you cultivate a space where they know that with this need, this is where I can go. The second part of that question, I think it obviously takes wisdom and prayer alongside that, because I understand that I have limits as well. And so I think this is the most important part of discipleship, is you're actually making disciples who go out and make disciples.
Okay.
And so I can't, I'm going to be a part of this person's life, hopefully forever. These are lifelong relationships. But at the same time, there is a turning loose almost in a way and saying, all right, go make disciples. And so you're raising up leaders. It's the same thing for any other thing in life in general. I'm thinking of playing football, right? In my position, if I leave and then there's no person that can take my position, that's a problem. That means we didn't do a good job of training the people that was next to come, or putting them in the right place to where they can grow and be able to do this when I do leave. And so the goal is to make disciples who continue to make disciples. And specifically in student ministry, I'm trying to cultivate a space amongst our leaders to where all of us are making disciples. And so I can't say yes to every single person, but I can point them to someone who can love them, who can care for them, who can shepherd their hearts, and continue to point them to Christ. It's difficult. It's hard to say no sometimes, but I think it takes wisdom and discernment to do that and do it well.
That's good.
Do you guys feel, it feels to me, and being in the space of, mobilizing men to fight for the fatherless as Jesus commands, it feels like I am swimming against the hardest current that there could possibly be. It feels as though, I'm asking somebody to jump across the Grand Canyon. It really kind of feels in some ways impossible. I love what you said about prayer, because I find myself, the prayer that I pray every day, this is a daily prayer, is, Lord, I need wisdom because I don't know what to do. And I just, when a problem seems so overwhelming or insurmountable, you're not sure what to do. So because I hear what you're saying, and it's I can point them to somebody because we can't save the world, right? We can't disciple the world. And I can point them to staff, right? Hopefully. Maybe I can point them to a few volunteers, but this takes the entire church.
Yeah.
This is not a thing that a few elected or paid individuals are going to accomplish. So can we talk about why is this such a struggle? Why are we struggling? And I'm going to pick on the men because this is a podcast primarily for men. Yeah. Patros, fathers. Why can we not? Why are dads not discipling? Why are men not discipling? Why is this such an issue?
Well, I was about to ask you, as a professional man, because I need to learn this. Now that I've taken in the twins and everything like that, I feel like time is harder to manage. Yeah. And I've had a passion for discipleship ever since I've been saved. And it's funny watching the progression of yes, I still have this passion, but dang, I have more responsibilities, and I feel like I'm failing at what I'm passionate about. Or I'm going to fail at discipling my own family in order to now make sure that this kid's doing okay. And half of these kids don't even reach out to me unless it's an emergency or they're finally willing to listen. You know what I'm saying? And so it's hard, and I'm not making any excuses, but for you, because I know that you do it, I'm not going to say that you do it perfectly, but I look up to you in the way that you still have a heart for that and manage your time. How do you?
Well,
because you're still helping with some of the coaching and stuff, even as the CEO of Man Up and Go.
But you hit the nail on the head. We don't do it perfectly.
Yeah, which no one does.
Let me frame up my answer with some scripture. Okay. And this is, I think, good for just a kind of baseline on the mandate to disciple, right? So this is, and if you're a Bible person, you know this verse. If you're not, this may be new to you, but there was something called the Shema in the Old Testament that governed the role of a Jewish man primarily. And it also applies to women. But in our context, we're gonna keep it with the men. It's Deuteronomy 6, 6, and 7. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. So these words that I command you today shall be in the heart. Well, he just gave them all the instructions on how to live. So if you think about it, if we do not understand the instructions on how to live, we're already dead in the water. Mm-hmm. So I think for a lot of guys, I'm answering my own question here almost, right? We don't know the word. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it earlier. Like, if we don't know the word, I feel like we're already, the battle's hard enough, and now we don't know the word, right? Mm-hmm. So that's number one. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house. Well, who's in your house? It's first and foremost your children and your spouse. Now, in this culture, there were also multi-generational. Mm-hmm. One of the travesties, I believe, of our culture here in the West is we do not do multi-generational. Multi-generational ministry, if you think about it this way, your church, every church, should have a 1-year-old and a 99-year-old and everybody in between. Think of an organization where that happens. Nonprofit, no. Business, no. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't happen anywhere else. The only place that happens is in the church. Even in an individual family, that doesn't really happen. But in the church family, that's where that happens. And God did that on purpose, because you're born into this world, you are totally dependent. You leave this world, you're totally dependent. Mm-hmm. And you need people around you who are taken care of, right? So I think that the first thing to do in that verse is it's got to be your house. But then there is this component of who else is in your house? Mm-hmm. Who else are you inviting into your house, right? And when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise, well, you pretty much covered it all, right? So you're to teach these things diligently to your children in all those circumstances. So I think we have to resist the temptation to feel guilty when our time is really in that child rearing phase. And you know, now for most guys, they're not like you. They're not out there, like, they don't have even a heart for discipleship. They're not even discipling their own kids, much less want to disciple anybody else. But for those who are trying to walk in the way, I think we have to be a little more lenient with ourselves. And I'm not saying we don't do what God asks us to do, but bro, taking on your own kids, taking on kids from the foster care system, adopting, all of those things, once you get into that world, that is your world. Mm-hmm. That is your discipleship opportunity. There isn't like, so I think that's my first, my hot take to you is, you're in it. So like whatever your normal was before, you're in a new normal.
Yeah, it's an extreme version of family, and I think that's where you start feeling like that guilt, because you're not even just doing like normal family stuff. You're also like doing home visits, meeting with a biological family that lives here or here. But you still feel guilty of like all these people that I had normal communication with, I've not cut it off, but become less available. But then you still like, you're very much like still discipling guys.
Yeah, but it changes. Yeah. It changes. And so the depth to which, and I'll give you a good example. So we had a young man up. I had him up the other day doing some work. And so we had a chance to talk for an hour or so. Well, those are, I don't get to do that as often as I used to, right? Mm-hmm. So it was actually really great. Mm-hmm. So part of it is just, and this goes to the idea of geography and proximity. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get your take on that, Twin, too, because, you know, I explained this to my team the other day. This young man, part of discipleship is just being present. You know, someone has said 90% of life is showing up. There's a lot of truth to that. Just show up. If you show up consistently, you're going to win more than you lose. And so we have a 5 a.m. club. Just showing up is just half the battle, right? It's probably 90% of the battle. You just show up. And I was telling him I would love to get him in that, because that's what he needs. He needs that daily interaction of seeing men, this is how you live, because it's not really about working out. Mm-hmm. It's about way more than that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But he lives an hour from me. Mm-hmm. So we do 5 a.m. For me to get him, I'd have to leave my house at 3, pick him up, at 4, be back by 5, work out for an hour, take them home. We'd be there by 7. I get back by 8. The kids need to go to school at 8. So it's like, well, we're you know, where's my own time with the Lord? Where's my, you can't save them all.
Yeah.
You can only do what God is. There's, Oswald Chambers has this saying that I love. He says, bloom where you're planted. Mm-hmm. And I just love that because it's this idea of don't try to be something that God hasn't equipped you to be. Mm-hmm. Like, you're in a season right now where he's like, you're discipling the case manager, you're discipling the bio kids, you're discipling the bio parents. Like, you have 3 segments of discipleship opportunities. So it does mean you're going to have to cut off other stuff. Not that you're cutting them out. It's just like, no, I've got to prioritize this for now. So it looks different, but that's part of growing up. That's part of, accepting what God has for you versus you trying to create your own path for God. Oh, no, I'm going to do this for you, God. And he's like, no, I don't want you doing that. Like, I want you doing this other thing. Yeah. One of the things I like, the talents, we know the parable of the talents. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, like, I thought I had 5 talents. Which, if you know me, that will not surprise you. And I had to realize God is not asking me to be Billy Graham. Mm-hmm. He didn't give me Billy Graham's 5 talents. He gave me like a half talent or a quarter talent. And he's like, I want you to double that one first. Mm-hmm. If you double that one, then maybe I'll enlarge your territory. We'll talk. So it's like, just bloom where you're planted. And you responded yes to that call.
Yeah.
So now you're in it, and so you do what is necessary for that season, right?
Well, I wonder if that's why maybe because it's hard when we have guys out here, obviously, that maybe have more time or maybe they're in charge of their schedule or something and they're not wanting to coach or disciple guys because it's too messy. And so I might be over gracious now because I'm like, oh, now I know what it's like to have a family. This is hard. Cool. But like, I wonder what does it look like, right, for a man that, let's say, owns his schedule but also has kids in sports, this, that, and the third. Like, what does discipleship look like for that guy, especially when it comes to the topic of the fatherless?
Mm. I mean, Twin, I'm gonna pitch, I have an answer, but I'm going to pitch to Twin. Like, do you see among the dads that you roll with, maybe they're younger dads just based on your age, but have you noticed a shift or a change between those guys and like the single guys
that are in a ministry, right?
Yeah.
When you say shift, you mean and just how they manage their time?
Yeah, how they manage their time, their priorities.
For sure, it's completely different. Yeah. I'm thinking of one specific guy right now, but actually it's kind of crazy because this guy moves with a motor that you think he didn't have kids or a wife, and he still loves them and cares for them well. And so while I do see a big difference between the guy married with a family and just the married guy versus the single guy, I also know that there's a deeper root cause to either one, and it goes back to the heart of the matter is, do you desire to love and care for people? Because you can have all the time in the world and still not be doing that. Yeah. And you can have a family and be doing that and doing it well. And so I've seen both sides of it, and it's definitely a difference, though, between using myself as an example, when I was single, my time looked different, and the amount of people I can be with on a normal basis was different. But now that I'm married, I have a wife who I'm called to love and care for and disciple first and foremost.
Yeah.
Things change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think having a family does make you more gracious. You know, you're a little more forgiving.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I was a little too hard.
I see, that's hard. And I think there's a great truth to what you're saying, Twin, which is, and like, if you go back to that Deuteronomy verse, like, these words shall be on your heart. If the words aren't on your heart, you're not going to do it no matter how much time you have. If the words are on your heart, you're going to find a way to do it no matter what. It looks differently. So the time that you can invest. So like for this young man that I was chatting with the other day, probably at least once a month, we're doing something like that. Now, it would be more effective if I could have him every week, or we could, more ideally, I see him every day.
Yeah.
Right? That would be the true, like, rabbi talmudim, like teacher-student kind of relationship that Jesus would have been accustomed to. You know, the rabbis talked about you need to be so close to your rabbi that like the dust of his sandals are spilling onto you. Like that's how close you're walking behind him, right? A dusty culture, like kicking up dust, and you're literally like absorbing his dust. It's really difficult to do that outside of your family, outside of your immediate family, just the way that our culture is set up.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge we're in the 21st century in the West, and
our context makes it difficult.
Makes it a huge difference. I mean, shoot, people will drive 90 minutes just to get to work, you know, in some cases or whatever.
Yeah.
And thinking about theology, if someone's willing to drive 90 minutes to get to work, you're telling me that they won't invest 30 minutes in reading a Bible story to their kid? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it comes back to, I think, priorities.
Yep. Yeah.
And what are we prioritizing?
So good, man.
We should be able to disciple. We ought to be able to find something. And even if it's, and I say this, but I mean it in the utmost, even if it's just your spouse. As a man, you should be doing that. You should be leading in that area. Now, I can hear some people going, oh, well, a woman can disciple herself or whatever. I can hear that. But it's like, yeah, she should be. She should have somebody too. But the way that God has created the marriage covenant, like I truly and genuinely believe a woman is looking to her man to lead, even if he is not as smart as her, even if he's not as gifted, and with the word, she still is looking for leadership. And I would think for a woman, like, if she just sees her man trying, how attractive that. Like, if she's following Jesus hard and she sees her man at least trying, like, she must be like, man, that's so good, right?
Yeah.
So a man should at least be doing that. But I think you're right, Twin. I think we make a lot of excuses in what we prioritize. And if it's not on our heart, to answer your question, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, right?
Yeah. That's good.
Let's talk specifically about the next generation and really kind of taking it home for you. I think if there's dudes listening to this who are like over the age of 60, probably relating to a Gen Alpha and a Gen Z is probably difficult.
It's going to be very hard. They're like, what's up, chat? And they're like, what's a chat?
And they do this because they also have neck problems. I was reading a book, Warren Wiersbe, and I think it's called On Being a Servant of God, and he talked about this very thing, like the older generation. He cautioned them because the older you get, you've been through life, you've already tried what the younger generation is doing, and you realize that didn't work. And then you get kind of like, why are we trying to change things all the time? It works the way it is. And it's just easy to fall into that. And he cautioned the older generation against that. Said, don't do that. Unless you're dead, God still wants to use you.
Wow.
And you can't be effective if all you're doing is complaining about the next generation. So listen to them. I thought that was so wise. I mean, dude wrote the book when he was probably 78 years old.
Wow.
I thought that was so wise. So as we're thinking about the next generation and this generation, maybe we could just start with that. How do we relate? And there was a Barna study, or Pew Research Center study, that said that only 30% of millennials identify as religiously affiliated, compared to 70% of the baby boomer.
Crazy.
So my guess is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha is even less. They just don't identify it. It's like not important. It's a non-issue. So help us understand, if you said, here are the 3 to 5 things that Gen Z and or Gen Alpha believe. You work with them. What do they believe? Help us understand.
I would say the first thing, and I think the biggest issue, and I think this gets to the root of it, is we've done a terrible job nowadays of really teaching the next generation that the church should be the most important. We live in a time where the church is just an option. It's just another good idea.
So it's on the menu.
Yeah, yep. Sports is more important.
Oh my gosh! Don't get me started about the sports.
And so it's a issue, and you were getting at it earlier. It's priorities.
Yeah.
If we truly, I'm not a parent yet, but I have an opportunity to love and care for and shepherd the teens that I have, that the Lord's given me. If we truly believe the things that we said to them, we would treat them differently in a way. The time we spend with them, the intentionality we would have with them, the urgency we'd have to see them grow or to see them just know Jesus, it would be different. But I think too often now is the church is just, the gospel is just a good idea to some of these people instead of this is actually life. And this, when you believe this and you have a relationship with Christ, like he is eternal life. And so there's this competition almost where it's like, sports game on Sunday or church, right? And so we battle with some of those things, but I would also go along to the topic of just discipleship where, and I'm learning this as I go, to be honest, is that discipleship isn't just, I'm not just discipling a high schooler to be a teenager. Like the goal is for them to be adults, right?
That's good.
Be older, loving Jesus, still following Christ, raising their kids one day to know Jesus and love Christ. And so I think we can't, specifically in the household, we can't make church and just another option. It has to be, this is the most important. Everything else bows to this priority, Jesus Christ and the gospel.
Like in some sense, it's like it's almost not their fault. And trust me, I'm not trying to like take away responsibility. I tell my kids all the time, personal responsibility. Like that is a virtue in our household. But it's almost like if they're looking to if they're looking to the older generation and they can clearly see, like they're not dummies. They can clearly see we're not prioritizing this because we're giving you the option to do sports on the weekends, or you can do church, and if there's a conflict between the two,
I'm being told church isn't a priority.
Yeah, and it's being modeled for me, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think this is so important that but you don't bring me there, it's just like the person who the atheist person who talks about the people who say they believe, but if you actually believe this and you're not telling people about Jesus,
you hate me,
right? And so I feel to some extent it's similar where we could keep saying this is important, but until you exemplify this for me, how important it is. And that's what teens like really want to see. Like we live in this time where like people do want truth.
Yeah.
I think people want real, but we just aren't giving them that. And so they're leaving the church. They get to college and they say, the stuff that I learned back in my youth group or in my church, it didn't really matter. I just did it because
that's what everybody was doing.
Right?
Yeah.
It was it was like the new fad at the time. And, obviously, when persecution comes or anything, it doesn't even take persecution.
Yeah.
It could just take, I want this and I don't want that, therefore Jesus goes to the back burner. But when you've truly just sown like a deep seed and there's a true foundation there, these kids, what do? They go to college. They continue to love Jesus. They actually get involved in a community on that campus or in that city where they go to school or whatever. And they keep going, right? And so I just think we've done, again, that's why I love the conversation of discipleship, because the teens that I have an opportunity to disciple, I want to do it so that their families, one day, God willing, when their parents and when their grandparents, they can look to their parents and grandparents and say, like, they love Jesus. And I want it to be because in their youth group, they were given the gospel. They were exemplified how to live out the Christian life. I don't do this perfectly, so I'm not testing like that I do it perfectly. But that's my heart's desire, and my goal is that these kids will actually grow into maturity. And that takes place, I think, when we continue to make the main thing stay the main thing. We haven't done that in our culture as well.
Yeah, you mentioned during that, you said something to the effect of the kids want real. Something like that. Can you just, both of you guys, speak to that piece of it? Because I think if you're 60 plus, and there's I think a rejection of this kind of started in my generation, and I think it's trickled down. Like you wanted polished. So one of the criticisms we could have of the church is that when you walk in, we say we're a place for the broken, and then we treat you like you're an outcast when you walk in. When you're broken, we're like, why are you here? Get out of here with your smelly clothes and your like I always say this: if a drunk person walk into a Sunday morning service and was stumbling down, I can only imagine several people, just the horror that would be. Yeah. And then them looking to the staff to go, hey, will you take care of that guy? Like, you're the professional here, go take care of that. Can you just get him out? I don't really want to see that. And then, oh, good, he's out in the hallway. Oh, phew, we can go back to our sanitized, Christian walk now, right? But, like, they want real. What does that look like? Like, when you say they want real, and, like, how do... Like, if I am an older guy who maybe has a little more time and I am saying, you know what, I could disciple, I could pour into a kid, I do have some hours or whatever, but I'm having a trouble connecting with this idea of real. Like, they always want to talk about their feelings. I don't know even that you see what I'm saying, but what are they really wanting from an older adult?
I think when we think of the youth, we always think that they can't handle truth. Or they don't want the depth. And so one of the things we try to do, we either keep it super fuzzy and we don't actually go deep with them, or we try to masquerade ourselves to fit into their lens of what we think they want, right? Instead of actually being the, like, older person in the room. I mean, obviously you have teenagers who are just really immature. Yeah. And so, like, it's like...
It varies.
Yeah. But you also have the mature ones. And I would say, like, I'm thinking in our context, dude, we have some middle school girls, and I've never seen some more mature middle school girls that actually love Jesus. They want to hear a solid sermon on a Wednesday night. They're taking notes, and they're ready to have that discussion come breakout groups. It's the coolest thing ever. But at the same time, I also know for our middle school boys, it could be like, it could be different, right? And I think they're solid. Like, they know their theology, but it's easier for them to goof off, right? The girls, they take it way more serious. The guys, it can be harder.
And it could be different 5 years from now where it's flipped.
Yep.
Yeah.
But just being honest in the sense of, like, I've always said it, like, I've never been the fun guy. I just happen to be, like, a little more serious and lately I've just found it to I'm just like, I just got to be myself. Like, I can't act like somebody I'm not. Not only will these kids sniff that out and see it, but, like, this is hard for me to just keep wearing this mask. So I'm just going to be myself, and either they accept it or they reject it.
Yeah.
And, man, they just have fun.
It feels more natural.
They enjoy it. It is more natural. And I could be myself, and hopefully it gives them the opportunity to be themselves, too. And so I think, like, when we try to not be, when we aren't as real or as, like, when they want truth, it's usually us making truth more shallow. And we just mask ourselves and put on some type of act around them that they don't want. They want real. They want somebody to lead them. They want somebody to love them. And when they come with their problems from school, I'm getting bullied, my girlfriend broke up with me, I'm struggling with depression and anxiety, they actually know that they can come to somebody that's going to lead them versus another one of their friends that they just want to make them feel fuzzy or whatever. That's what I think of specifically in our context.
Well, the question I have and a follow-up to that is that you have, like, I was talking to this young man the other day, and he actually was in a church and was trying to go to this men's group, and he opened up. And I don't know what he said or how he couched it, but he was like, man, I got like a deer in a headlight look. Like, they were like, yo... Because he's had some trauma. I mean, this kid has been in foster care his whole life, and just there's a lot of trauma there. He opens up, and he is met with what is essentially a shutdown. He's like, man, I don't know if I can go back there. So, like, what would you say to – because on that context of being real, like, an older dude, I want to be myself, but at the same time, like, these kids are talking about things that we would have never talked about at that age. They have much more – knowledge of the world just because of the internet age in which they grew up. Like, they're just like, they're beyond me in some capacity. Like, what would you say to that guy to encourage him?
Oh, we got different answers on this, maybe.
Go ahead, you go first.
So to encourage that one guy, sorry about the neck.
Every time you turn, I am suppressing.
I see it. That's why I said it.
I'm suppressing the need to laugh.
You literally man. Every time I look at you, you're like
biting my tongue, literally.
So when I heard you say that the other day, one of the things that I thought is, deep down, we are all looking for an excuse to hate God. And we want the chance to use anybody and anywhere and anything to blame shift. and say, those people are the reason that I will not commune with God. How they weren't able to interact with me. They weren't properly trained in how they responded to me. Therefore, God, me and you aren't good because of your people. And that's just not good enough to God. At some point, I have to answer to God, and he's not going to look at me and say, you know what, yeah, they didn't answer to you good in that context. So I think sometimes, we just talked about this right before the podcast, like, sometimes we don't actually believe we're broken. We believe we're sort of broken. We believe we're victims, but we still have a pride inside of us where we're thinking, you know, I know better. And therefore these guys, because reality is you could look at a room of guys that are willing to listen to you without the answers and be like, you know what, they just don't get it yet, but man, they're still sitting here with me. And so the lens at which you intake the information can be different. Well, given when you have trauma, you're going to look at stuff in bad ways. I've done it too with people that try to disciple me where I completely missed it. But my answer probably would be that is like, dog, I think it's on you. Like, I think that they could use some training, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't know, like, you've never been in this situation. Oh, now we got to go get some training. Maybe we got to learn better. And maybe you're there so that they can realize that they have to get training. And so maybe instead of leaving, you actually engage them. Now, obviously, I know that context might be different, but I think generally with student ministry, especially, one of my things has always been that is like, I tell every guy that I encounter, like, you have access to me. If you call me at 2 a.m. and you're in an emergency and I'm able to wake up and see it and answer, you got me. When we were in Ohio filming, oh, that's not public? It doesn't matter.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's
all right.
Good.
When we were in Ohio
it's not like you told him what we were doing.
We're just filming an Instagram video.
Remember when we took a flight
just to Ohio?
Just to Ohio
to hang out.
To go to lunch.
Like, one of the guys, I got off the phone with Alexis. It was like probably 11 p.m. Kyle wasn't there anymore, so I had the room to myself. And one of the guys is like, bro, can I call you? I'm picking the phone up at 11 p.m. and I'm going to stay up and talk to him because I'm available if you actually want to be discipled. If you actually want to open up about your sin, if you actually want to do all these things, you have access. Now, there's certain guys that I'm not going to chase because if you don't want it, like, I'm not here to chase you. Like, you need to know you're broken and you need to hit that point. And so I think that that's what my answer is like, I genuinely think that some people or a lot of people need to reach a point where they're like, man, I'm bowing. Like, I'm bowing. God, you got to take this. And I'm willing to listen. I don't know. That might be your answer to, I'm not sure.
Nah, we probably.
I'm a little more harsh.
But I think, it works together, like, complements.
Yeah.
Because on my end,
this feels like a good cop, bad cop.
But in actual student group, I'm the, like, fun, like, no, twin, it's all good. Like, but 100%. Like, when it comes to this version of it, I'm harsher. Yeah.
I'm more of the chaser. Yeah. I think I desire that people come with their issues. And I mean, I might even always have an answer. Yeah. But as long as you know you could come, which you were getting at some of that, is like, to me, that's a win. Yeah. Because there's a trust that's developed. And if I don't have the answer for you, I'm going to try to get the answer for you. I'm going to try to care for you and love you as best as I can. But the fact that you know that you can come to me, I must have done something. I'm thinking of, like, the non-Christian who they don't want anything to do with Christianity. Yeah. But as soon as something hits the fan, they call their Christian friends and say, can you pray for me? Like, that's what I think of when specifically to this guy. Like, I would just want to sit there and listen. I just, like, bring all your issues. I feel like we need to be more honest, like, in the church. Like, that's what I ultimately desire is. And so for a person like that, I would be like, you know what? I probably can sympathize with you. And I want to open up so that you know that this is a safe place. Obviously, there's wisdom in how you go about these situations. But for a guy like that, I want you to know that the church is the hospital for the broken. And I think somewhere we've made it too difficult for people to understand that.
Well, and also, real quick.
That's so good.
Well, like, one of the things that I think that the church has adopted that I think is very unhelpful is that you need to look like me. You need to have lived my story for you to therefore help me with the gospel. That you need to be, you can't, me as a Latino teenager, guy in my 20s that's been through trauma, you can't be a 65-year-old white dude and disciple me. That's garbage.
Yeah.
Because the people that first discipled me were these guys from like Wisconsin and all these other places. But you know what? They were willing to meet me where I was at, not having lived my story. But we didn't even have to go there because the Bible still was for me. And so I think the church has adopted a bad narrative that, like, you need to look like me to disciple me into being a man. Like, that's not the case. No. But then we've taught that to the next generation that, like, if you don't have someone that looks like me, which obviously I think diversity is important, but in that sense that you have no value to me. Yeah. That's garbage.
That's good. I do think it's garbage. And
I think it's helpful to have people
it's
that look
helpful
like
to have,
but you know what I mean.
But I think that goes back to the whole idea of this, like, what is the church comprised of? The church is comprised of a multi-ethnic, multi-generational group of, sinners who have been saved by God's grace and who are walking in the way of Jesus. And, in some sense, where you live is just going to necessarily reflect what your church composition is. Like I was sharing with the story the other day, like where I live, and I've chosen to live there. And I have to subconsciously examine, did I choose to live there out of my own personal comfort? Like when it was 2014, we chose to live in that particular spot. There were some strategic reasons for that spot, that I think were probably good, but then there's some other things subconsciously. Did I choose to live in that spot because it gave me the comfort that I desired, even if I wasn't consciously thinking about this is comfortable for me. It was just more of like this like unspoken thing that happened. But I was telling the team, I'd have to drive probably about 12 to 15 miles to get to a pocket of what we would describe as materially poor individuals. Now, it's not that they don't have access to the gospel, but a lot of people who are materially poor, at least in the context where I live, are that way. For a lot of them, it's drug addiction. Like, there is a lot of that goes on. Yeah. Now, a lot of it is generational, and so that's just what they know, and whatever. But the point is, like, I'd have to go out of my way. And so, my church context typically is going to, resemble my geography and my proximity. And so is there an obligation to make it mirror more what the kingdom actually is? And I can argue both ways. I can argue, you know what, I should move to, St. Pete, and I should have an opportunity to connect with, the affluent whites in the north and, whatever, affluency exists, elsewhere, and non-affluency, right? And then part of me thinks, no, bloom where you're planted, like you're where you're at, make the most of your situation. So I struggle with it, because if I'm a young, and this young man that I was talking to the other day, he's Mexican. So if I'm a 20-something Latino who's had all this trauma, whatever, I could see great value in having a 46-year-old Latino dude to talk to. Yeah. And this kid has no problem talking to me. And in fact, he said this. He's like, these guys weren't like you, Mr. Jeff. So there's a yin and a yang of it, where it's like I see both sides to this, where it's like, yes, it's on this young man. These guys, at least they listened, but then at the same time, he's like, they don't listen like you do. And that was a relational capital thing that I've earned over time.
For years.
So I think that there is this, so somehow the older generation, and you touched on it earlier, I think we got to be better at listening and less prone to give our opinion, less prone to just speak. I think that's part of it. I do think from an older generation standpoint, and looking at the Gen Z and the Alpha, like it kind of appears, that they have to share everything. And so we're like, why you got to share everything? Like, is nothing sacred? Is there nothing private? Like,
there's value to that, yeah.
Right? And there is value to that. So it's like, I think it cuts both ways, a little bit.
Yeah.
Listen, we don't have a ton of time left. I want to get to this. This kind of like if we can wrap some things here. This is the Patros podcast. So Patros is Greek for father, for those who don't know, and it carries with this idea of passing on wisdom to the next generation. So I do think, one of the biggest things that we are trying to do on this podcast is to get older men to see the need to pour into younger men, to disciple. So that's why this is such a cool topic, because it's literally what we're trying to do. And there are so many who haven't had that in their lives, fatherless, whatever. But then there's just regular dads who are just trying to pour into their kids. And we just read, that's the primary. You can be doing that first before you do anything else. So I'd love to just hear in closing, Twin, what would you say is the best way for an older guy who wants to be a Patros to a younger generation? What's the best thing he can do to connect to that group that you're working with? And Allan, then maybe you can kind of give us some closing thoughts.
Okay. You may not like my answer.
I love this.
But the reason I say that is because it sounds simple, and I think it's easier said than done. I think if all people were to take this approach, it would be, and I say that universally because I think it shows us that in the scripture. I would say the call to the leader in any way, whether it's in a household, in the church, wherever, the call is to be faithful and trust God to be fruitful. And as I continue to just grow in my understanding of the scriptures, of leadership, in so many different instances, I have the opportunity to either be faithful or unfaithful, right? And so God has, in this season of my life, God has given me the stewardship to serve as student minister at Building 28 Church. I'm called to be faithful to this church and to the teams that the Lord has given me. I'm called to be faithful, to do everything I can to love and shepherd these kids, and I'm to trust God to cause all the fruit he desires to grow. And like I said, it's easier said than done, but I think when the desire is to truly glorify God, we'll be faithful and trust him to be fruitful. That looks like, specifically in student ministry, giving my kids Jesus. Him we proclaim. And every way I can do that, I want to give them Christ. I want to cultivate an environment and an atmosphere where they not only can trust the people that they're around, but they know that when they come with their issues and their problems, they'll be heard and they'll be given wisdom and direction on how to go. And I want it, God willing, to be from the scriptures. How does God, what does God have to say about this? Because the gospel changes everything.
Yeah. Amen.
And not only does it change everything, but in every facet of our lives, we should be able to see through the lens of the gospel. One of my professors, sorry, I'm trying my best to...
it's good. It's good.
But one of my professors, man, it was like one of my first... Actually, I was going on a visit at the seminary, and this dude said, the gospel, think of playing basketball. And he said, the gospel is like your pivot foot. You know how you got the one foot that never moves, but then you got the other foot that can go in every direction.
I like that.
And he says, the gospel is that pivot foot for us as Christians. And every direction we turn in life, we're to see our life through the lens of the gospel. And so I think when we do that and we keep Christ as the prize and the ultimate reward, we truly will be faithful and we'll trust him to be fruitful. And I don't say that in the sense of I got it all together. I've been encouraged. I've been convicted and held accountable, rebuked, and just by brothers who love me. And it's been an encouragement. And I can say today that that's my goal, to be faithful now, today, so that the fruit that God bears and everything that is going on, I can just continue to look back and say I was faithful.
You know what, is in summary of that is almost like the practicality for an older guy trying to be a Patros is, how about you just do what Jesus tells you to do?
Yeah.
Part of it is that, I love that pivot foot analogy where it's almost like, hey, stay in your word, make yourself available to Lord, ask him to open up doors of opportunity where you can serve and disciple, and then let him do what he does. There's, I think, a really good practical value to just that piece of it. So that's a good take. Allan, what do you got?
Well, I think churches have treated student ministry in the next generation as if it's like a staff and volunteers job. And so they'll train anybody that's 30 years or younger and then just give it to them. And what we really need to be doing is teaching our seniors out, like seniors as in like people, you know, older, and your families on what it looks like to disciple their teenagers, to disciple their, you know, youth. And that it's not just a youth group job. It's primarily them as far as like capacity or mission, but that as a whole entire village, it's your job. To be engaging the youth and knowing how to, you know. I think that it's so important for us to understand that we're not individuals, we're an entire network of people.
That's good. Man, Twin, thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate you guys.
We appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
this was awesome. Loved it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on the Patros podcast as we are embracing healthy masculinity. Thank you again. See you guys later.